Okay. Looks like we're up and running. Video looks a little bit choppy, but hey, it works. I adjusted the bit rate to see if that gives us a little bit faster return. So okay, we look to be live. Okay, the video is choppy, but as long as the sound is good, that doesn't matter. Besides, you're just looking at my face anyways. Don't need to worry about that. Let's see. Now, pop out the chat. Excuse me while I get this all organized. Okay, that seems to work. Now. Okay. Nothing much to do until everybody clocks in. There. Fine, adjust that. All right, Shalom Yafa. Okay, we can get the link up. Seems to be working again. We have decided that the system fears Elisheva because a couple weeks back when she was here, the system worked. Then she was gone for a couple weeks where she wasn't here with us, and the system didn't work. Now she's here with us again, and the system works. So, don't know what to tell you. Okay. So yeah, this is a new link, of course. So that needs to get up on Facebook so people can find us. All right. Shalom, Vince. We haven't clocked yet to see what kind of a delay we have on this session, but at least you're on. The funny thing is, the type chat. There we are. That's cute. I like that. You got your own online coffee mug. Well, if you can see on the camera, that's what I set up for. Good, we're all back on. Shalom, Ruhama. I lose a couple weeks not being able to connect, and I suddenly forget everybody's names. Okay. When the kids get back, I'll have them clock the delay to see if there, how much there is this time. Okay, it's 12:18. Let's give it a couple more minutes, give people a chance to find their way back in. But it's nice that it's working. I'm so relieved. It's been massively frustrating to get online and look at the tutorials and try to figure out how to get things to work, and finally decided this time I'm going to go extra. The speed is much better when I hardwire the computer to the modem. Although even in the wireless, it's not as bad. It's not so bad that it should have given us trouble, but nonetheless, it was problematical. So we this time what I did is rebooted the router, and basically had a clean start with that, and then hooked up the cable to the computer, so I have the maximum speed, and it's doing rather well for speed, so I'm pleased with that. And made a few adjustments to the settings that I had seen on some of the videos, but I couldn't find. How some of these, when someone's teaching on something that they know how to do and they're very comfortable with it, and they're trying to do a tutorial on one of these things, and they fly through it. So you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and they're switching pages, and moving around from one spot in the program to another, and you lose it all. So we finally stumbled on where to find all the buttons. All right. So that's okay. I don't know if you got my email from this morning. It dawned on me this morning that I never did get up to you the bulletin and the write-up that I have on Yom Yerushalayim. So that's my fault. That's my fault entirely. Looks like a 1-minute delay. Excellent. Okay, so the last session, Elisheva clocked it at 3 minutes. Abigail later clocked it at 2. If you're clocking it at 1 minute, maybe we're slowly catching up to the right time. That's excellent. 1 minute is hugely better than what we had a couple weeks ago. So real good with that. So we're good. Okay. Anything you want to talk about before we get started? Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and get started on the bulletin part. And if you can do me a favor, get the bulletin up on the website or Facebook or wherever you put it, so people can look at it during the week. That's my fault entirely. I for whatever reason, just was not on my mind to do earlier in the week when I should have done it. And then yesterday afternoon, after I had my eyes worked on, when my eyes are sore and really fuzzy, then it dawns on me I need to get this done. So it wasn't until later last night that my eyes had recovered enough to where I can sort of see. So there's probably all sorts of really entertaining typos in the bulletin, but that I couldn't see last night. So we'll see. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the bulletin. The bulletin. Then we'll move on in to the Parsha discussion. Okay. Okay, it's 22 ER, or May 16 today. Today is the 35th of the Omer, so we are more than halfway through, actually about 2/3 of the way counting the Omer. We're only a couple weeks away from Shavuot, Feast of Weeks. So we will, when we get there, God willing, and I know Gail's really interested in finding a way for us to meet no matter what, but we should make every effort to try to target for Shavuot to get back together, even if we don't meet for Sabbath services that day, but in the evening maybe. I don't know, maybe by then we should get together and just do a regular service and see what happens. That's another thing I have to remember to do, because it's in the back of my mind to talk to my contact over at the church and see what their position is of us sneaking in and getting started with our meetings. Not really sneaking in, just walk in. There's no reason for us to sneak. This is our constitutional right. And we've allowed for that to be set aside temporarily, but we're not going to allow for it to be permanent. Okay, so 1 minute from the phone and Roku, so okay, good. All right. Okay, today's reading is a double portion, Bechar and Bechukotai. We have a lot of double portions this year, since we don't have the pregnant year with the 13 months in it. Things get squished, and it's always my it's always good night. Sitting around too much. I'm pulling a Biden. Can't remember how to finish a sentence. Good. I messed up. Okay, so we beginning our second session here. Okay, next Wednesday, Galatians chapter 1. I messed up when we were doing Galatians a couple weeks ago that I said that we had finished chapter 1, when in fact that this week we're finishing chapter 1. So been very, very nutty as far as my organization. All right, see if I can move this over. Good. Okay. Okay, next week's reading we are beginning. Where is my thingy? There. Next week's reading we are beginning Sefer B'Midbar. Oops. Okay, we got it. All right, never mind. The English name, of course, is Numbers because it starts off with the counting of the children of Israel. But the actual title in Hebrew is In the Wilderness, B'Midbar. Or if you want to be really technical, In Wilderness. The is there for English clarity. Okay. Yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting if we can work out how to do social distancing, quote unquote, and still have Nosh. We shall see. Okay. Upcoming events. Yom Yerushalayim is this coming week, this coming Thursday. I do have a handout for that prepared, and again, my apologies for not getting up to Yafa early enough so she can get it on Facebook or on the website and stuff like that. So that'll populate sometime soon. Okay. Also, the Saturday evening on Yom Rishon, just after sundown, the beginning of the week on Saturday evening is going to be Rosh Chodesh Sivan, if God cooperates with our calendar. Okay. The only other thing scheduled for the calendar is potentially if we can meet at the shul, we will have our Shavuot get together on Saturday the evening, May 30th, and if we can hang out at the park on Sunday, and we can reserve, get a kiosk reserved. We can meet for Shavuot in the park. Shavuot in the park. I feel like singing that song every time we talk about it. Okay. Questions, comments, rebukes with regards to the calendar or events coming up. I'll get next month's stuff. It's pretty quiet for the next couple of months. Mostly it's just Rosh Chodesh and one or another traditional thing. And that's not a whole lot else on the calendar till we get up to the High Holy Days in the fall. So this is harvest time. Yeah.
Antilinda says we need to figure out new protocol for meeting at shul pertaining to social distancing, bring your own food, etc.
Yeah. We'll figure that out. Once I get when I talk to the church people, find out if they will even allow for us, if they're concerned that the state may come down on them if we're renting space and they know that we're there. I want to make sure that we're all clear and above board. Considering the way things have been, I'm not too concerned that somebody's going to come busting in and arrest me. But on the other hand, I don't want to cause too much trouble. We shall see. Okay. Any other questions, comments, or rebukes with regard to the bulletin? All right. Let me. Let's see. Let me find. Okay, no. Okay, what happened to my... Oh, that's right. It's on another tab here.
There you go.
See, I can't remember what I'm doing here. Okay, this is... Yahoo. Okay, that was right. 25:1 restart, right?
I believe so.
Jeremiah?
No, Leviticus.
Oh, Jeremiah.
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me get this out of the way so I'm not pulling it up. Yeah, let's go ahead and see the change. Okay, yeah, 25:1. Okay, Bahar. Okay. Now let me pop up the chat. Okay, this is going to be a little bit harder to do. Don't worry, if they arrest me. That's okay. You know, I'm already. Oops, what did I do?
You press the start button. Just press escape. There you
Oh, I
go.
pushed the. Okay. There we are. Okay. Maybe I could. There. Okay, I think that'll work. Now I can see the chat and read the text. Okay, so Bahar, the name of the portion, of course, the Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, so Bahar, in the mountain. It's translated in the mountain, but in the Hebrew it's Bahar, which literally means in mountain, in case you want to be technical. However, in English, that doesn't make as much sense unless Moses was, underground mining at the time, mining something at the time God spoke to him. So in Hebrew, it makes sense. In English, it doesn't make sense, but that's okay. We survive. Okay. We get into another set of commandments when you get into the land. This is all... a lot of this is precursor to being repeated in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, so that we will, so a lot of this we will see again, and so it all bears repeating. So we start with the commandment to give your fields the seventh year of rest. Give it a Sabbath year of rest. Just like we work 6 days and take a seventh day of rest, the land works 6 years and takes a year off. Gail says we are families. Families don't need to social distance. That's true. I'm not wearing a mask just to talk to you on the computer. So. Okay, so, and I mentioned this in the Devar portion in our prior meeting. The wonderfulness of God, that He gives everybody a year off. Everybody doing agribusiness, they get a year off. And even in the Yovel, in the year of Jubilee, they get 2 years off. But God promises He's going to take care of us. And so you think about it, and the fields will take care of themselves. They will, commercially speaking, you replant every year, like a single crop like a wheat or something. But the trees and the vineyards and stuff, other than trimming and pruning, they don't start over like a wheat would do, or vegetables or planting. But if you let the and maybe this is why God told us to start counting the Sabbath year and the Jubilee not at not Nisan, but the first month of the year. The first month of the year to instead of starting counting there, because I thought, what's wrong with this? It's slowly making sense on me that what you get to do then is a lot of your commercial harvesting. Some of your commercial harvesting is going to be normally done after Yom Kippur. If you look at our agricultural season is fairly close to what it's over in Israel. Our agricultural season is we still have a lot of harvesting going on, even past October into November. Even up until frost. Okay. And there's still things that are harvesting. So we, the same thing's happening here. And so the idea is just kind of dawned on me this year, like thinking about it. Oh, okay. So what God designed for us to do is to let the produce that we would normally harvest go to seed. If it goes to seed, then you're going to have new crop the next year, even though you didn't plant it. And even the stuff that you harvest earlier in the year, there's always seed that falls into the ground and it's going to germinate and produce new. So God works out a way that we don't starve. Not only that, like I mentioned earlier, we get man. Right at this time, we're all getting man. We're getting quail. We're getting, we're already getting food from the hand of God. So is it asking too much that we would expect God would provide for us even through these times? And even with the additional year of the Yovel, 2 years in a row, so it's not asking too much. We just have to trust. Okay. Okay, so 7 Sabbath years, 49 years, and then the 50th year, which is technically the first year of the next cycle, is the Yovel, the Jubilee. Okay, and again, no planting, no harvesting. You eat whatever grows, and everybody's free to harvest out of your fields what they need to eat. Okay, so again, this works out as God's welfare system. Okay, you aren't paid to sit in your house and be poor, but rather God arranges for you to go and get the food you need so you can survive and work and to gain your own prosperity. Okay, then you have the laws concerning selling the land. Obviously, the land of Israel is not to be sold to somebody who's not of Israel. This is why even the modern state of Israel, nobody actually owns the land. The state owns the land. The people do not own the land. They do own the right to use the land, but the property in itself is owned by the Israel. And that same idea carries through. Okay, and then again, if you're selling a piece of land and it's just a short period of time to the Yovel, when all properties revert back to their owners, the original owners, you're not going to be able to sell it for full price because the person buying it's only going to get a couple of years of produce and work out of it. So, you have to set your prices accordingly. Okay. Verse 18, follow my decrees and be careful to obey my laws, and you will live safely in the land. This is a great promise. Okay. To follow God's commandments and he will prosper us. When we get into Deuteronomy, I talk about it all the time, that these are God's commandments for peace and prosperity, for a peaceful and prosperous society. Excuse me. And so we're seeing that here too. Follow his ways and things go well for you. Okay. This is repeated very frequently in Devarim and Deuteronomy. All right, I'm reading your comments. Okay. Let's see, anything of, if I missed something of interest, be sure to type something to remind me to go back and catch it. If you have a question about something, a comment, a rebuke, or anything. Okay. Interesting difference. Selling a house in a walled city, there's a right of redemption, which is sort of almost like seller's remorse, I guess you can call it that. Within the course of a year, if you have a house within a walled city and you sell it to somebody, you have up to a year to give the money back and undo the sale. Then after a year becomes permanently the permanently belongs to the buyer. Now there are some conditions on that. The villages in small towns and villages in the Bible are usually classified as those that don't have a fortification or wall. Rather, a little suburb kind of thing, or rural, kind of a little cluster of houses or something that doesn't have a wall. Okay, and those can be, but according to Torah, they can be redeemed and they are to be returned in the Jubilee. So it goes with the land. The land reverts, and so does the house in the unwalled town. Okay. However, there's a change with the Levites. The Levites, even if they sell their house, they have the right to return to their house at any time. That's in the Levitical town. So even if you sell your house to another Levite, you have a right to redeem it. It's also to be returned to the original owner because they belong on the Yovel. Okay. All right, verse 35, if a fellow Israelite becomes poor, do not take any interest or any profit from them, but fear your God, that you may so you can lend to them, but you don't lend at interest. And or sell them food at a profit. Now, here's the thing. This is God's welfare system. Okay, it's never, you can give food to somebody, but the desire is that even if you're poor, you learn to take care of yourself. You work to take care of yourself. You get yourself out of the poverty that you find yourself. And God arranges for help. You can take a loan without interest. You can buy food without the markup for profit, but you're still expected to take care of yourself. And this is a key component of a peaceful and prosperous society. The best way to and part of the reality is if you subsidize something, you make it grow. If you tax something, you make it shrink. And so you end up with sort of a backwards result you don't want people to starve, but on the other hand, you don't want to set up a system where people can, generation by generation, continue in a managed condition where they are relying entirely on other people to take care of them. And I've noticed this from many years ago. If you're content to live at a very low level of lifestyle, you really don't have to work. You can live off welfare. Not that it's really living, but it's which is not a good. It's not a good ethic. You should be taking care of yourself. And all the negative sides that go with being a ward of the state is that the people that manage the state take every opportunity to lord themselves over your life, and to the point where husbands are not welcome in a house that's funded by welfare. To create a further dependence on the state. And there's a tremendous amount of pressure to abort babies in families that are in welfare, and that ends up with some very genocidal side effects. So better to take care of yourself. Take the help that's there, then get yourself out of that poverty. And that's what God's design is. That's how you end up with peaceful and prosperous societies. Okay. Now it's interesting. The poor, verse 40, are to be treated as hired workers. That's a different level of care. Okay. If somebody has if somebody owns slaves, or in modern circumstances just a regular day worker or employee, there's still a level of care that you're supposed to give them. But to somebody who is, say, a contract worker, which this is, there's usually better terms. It's better negotiation, because now you're just not hiring somebody for the day. You've actually bought the contract, and you have a higher responsibility because of that contract. So you treat them better. Okay. And verse 42, because the Israelites are my servants. Do you want to stand before God and explain to him why you mistreated his people? Just because you can earn more money if you did. Not good. Okay? Okay. One of the more contentious issues in verse 44, what about people that you buy as slaves? Now, let's talk about that word for a second. People that you buy as slaves. The word there in Hebrew is avodah, which means also to work. So a worker and a slave is the same word in Hebrew. Okay, it means a laborer, somebody who works. And there's really not a difference except for if you add extra language, but the word itself does not plainly say only slaves and plainly only says hired employees, day workers and somebody like that. So understand, when some translations say slaves, it sounds bad. We have a really bad history in America about slavery. And so we're very cautious and nervous about the use of the word. But nonetheless, in this paragraph, in this condition, there's a difference that God makes between Israelites and other people. Israelites must be, you can hire them as day laborers, you can buy their indebtedness contract and make them indentured servants for 6 years, but you're not to own them permanently as property. However, somebody outside of Israel you may possess as property, and that can inherit as property through, from one generation to another. Now, this is not the same as the American historical version of slavery. there's a special phrase that was used for American slaves during the time of slavery, and it's called chattel property. And chattel is basically things of minor and miscellaneous value. And the intent there was that the people that were bought as slaves were minor property. They were denied rights as human beings. They were not allowed to be a human being. They were simply slaves. The difference here with what God is commanding is He has commandments, and we've already seen them, that you're still to have slaves, even the ones that you own from the nations, even the ones that you can leave as an inheritance to your descendants. They still have status before God. They still have status in society, and they have rights. Okay, two specific commandments in mind: that if you beat a servant, that you damage their eye, you're to set the servant free. If you beat a servant and break a tooth, you're to set them free. That means they have status, and that's very different than the American version of slavery, where you can do anything you want with them. You can beat them till they're dead, and it means nothing because they're your property, and that's all they are in the American, the past American version. Okay, so understand that the commanded version of slavery is different. There's some similarities, yeah, but it's different in that even foreigners who are slaves in possession have rights and have standing before God and before society. Okay. Okay. Now, if an Israelite becomes poor and basically sells their indentured contract to a foreigner, the foreigner has to treat them still within Torah. And the interesting thing is they retain the right to redeem themselves, or to have somebody redeem them at any point during the contract. The only qualification is how long until the year of Jubilee, to where obviously if the contract is short, then the value of the contract is small. If the contract is still long, then you have a while, and you have more value in the contract. Okay. Oops, I'm in the wrong spot here. On my phone, I can just keep going down. It goes to the next. Okay. Chapter 26. If you got any questions, comments, rebukes, go ahead and throw them in. Otherwise, I'll just keep going along. Okay. Chapter 26 is a repeat of a number of different commandments. A lot of effort. Don't make idols or set up images. Do not place a carved stone in your land to bow down before it. Okay, we're not talking about artwork. We're talking about things that people use as if they were gods. Okay, observe my Sabbaths and have reverence for my sanctuary. Okay, I always find it funny hanging out with other believers who think it's really strange that you would honor the Sabbath. For me, it's a non sequitur, because it doesn't make sense that you say you love God but you don't do what He says, and you actually give yourself theological reason why you won't do what God said you should be doing. But I'm preaching to the choir here. Okay. So, verse 4 actually. Follow His decrees, He will send rain. Okay. Do you see a connection there? Verse 6, grant peace in the land. Okay. And you have some pretty fabulous, fantastic statements. Verse 8, 5 of you will chase 100, 100 of you will chase 10,000. You know, think about it. Does God show this kind of favor even to a sinful and rebellious people? Yeah. Think of all the wars Israel's had to fight. When's the last time that Israel had, bigger armies, more tanks, more planes, more equipment when they fought a war? But what have the results been? Even in their rebellion and ignorance of God, God still looks out after Israel. Okay. Verse 10, this is the part I was talking about, how cool it is that God spells out to us. You'll still be eating last year's harvest when you have to move it out to make room for the new. This is on the sabbatical year. And if you're doing that, okay, verse 11, I will put my dwelling place among you, and I will not abhor you. I will walk among you and be your God, and you will be my people. So, again and again and again, God says he will be with us. And he always ends something that's really important that we really need to pay attention to. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt so that you will no longer be slaves to the Egyptians. I broke the bars of your yoke and enabled you to walk with heads held high. Okay. He reminds us over and over and again who he is, what is our relationship, So no one can ever doubt, we worship God. And someone will say, okay, which one? Well, that's pretty obvious. The one who brought us out of Egypt. The one who brought us out of slavery to be free people. Okay. So this is sort of a mini version of Deuteronomy. Now you get into verse 14. But if you don't, bad things are going to happen. And, a lot of this, again, the good promises of the good things that God does is a relatively short list, but there's a long list of bad things that will happen to you if you choose to not follow God's ways. So, if we want to be a holy people, we live by those things. Okay, chapter 27. Okay, making a special vow to dedicate a person to the Lord by giving a value. And again, the value is set. Now, there's room for controversy here because females are set at a lower value than males when it comes to this evaluation. And I would suggest we don't think of this as a relative value because of gender, but a relative value because of the capacity for physical labor. As a general rule, men are bigger and physically stronger and therefore more capable of physical labor than women, and thus at a higher value. Men were the ones who went to war at this point, and so they had a greater risk, so their value was higher. And that's about as good as I can explain that. Not that God likes men better than women, but just a matter of what can you do. Of course, you can always argue that women do the childbearing, and that's plenty of work. They're the ones rearing the kids. That's plenty of work. They're putting up with their husbands. That's a ton of work. They should be worth a lot more, but. But nonetheless, this is what's in the Bible. This is what it is. I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to defend one point of view or another. This is what it is. God always has a way of science and society catching up to what he says. So I'm not going to work too hard at trying to defend this. That's just my 2 cents of why I think there's a difference in the value. Okay, see Tara. Get a comment here. Let's see if I can. You need to type in print that's not so fuzzy. So my eyes haven't completely recovered from yesterday's thing. And I'm using trifocals, and I'm still trying to find which one is least. Okay. People, was the land actually, yeah, desolate for a time? Yes, actually, and it's kind of funny how that happened. Southern part of Israel is always more wilderness. And it's, in fact, that's, Bamidbar, which is getting into, that's where the children of Israel were camped out and traveling around, is in that wilderness area. It doesn't mean it was desert, dry, sandy, but it was more empty of people. Now, the land became desolate, though, but for a whole different reason. There's two basic reasons. After the second rebellion, around 125 CE, the Romans came in and retook the land and salted a lot of the fields to where they were no longer usable, and so the land basically went to waste. Even after that time, though, God added another whammy to it, but he actually used Muslims for that. The land was already underpopulated after the Muslim takeover, but during the Turkish Caliphate, there's a lot of absentee landowners who didn't live in the land, but they owned the lands and they took rents from people to use the land. The Caliphate had decided that they're going to tax the property based on the number of trees on your property. So the lesser the trees, the lesser your tax. Now, if you're not living there and you don't really care, what are you going to do? You're going to cut down trees, so you have to pay less taxes. And so there's an extra damage to the land that when by the time it was time to begin restoring the land to Israel, it was very much a desolate area, because it was not too long after the destruction of the Caliphate did Israel start coming back home to the land. And so essentially Israel had to replant most everything. Very few trees in the land, and very desolate, very dry. And so, most of what you see, and you can see it to today if you see satellite maps of Israel compared to what's around it. You have green growing fields within Israel, and yellow, orange, dead, dry land outside of Israel. And that's, part of that is the love of ownership. Part of that is God's promise to restore the land to her people. So, sorry, long explanation. Okay, so you're going to have evaluation on what is promised. An animal that's going to be given. The priests are going to do that. I'm not exactly sure why one would want to do something like this, unless there's a particular religious benefit or maybe a societal benefit of being somebody who dedicates a field or a person or an animal to God, because you have the option to buy back the value, so you're basically just paying money to the temple operation. Yeah, yeah, Mark Twain. Yeah, he's famous for quoting this for having traveled through what is then called Palestine. So, yeah, yeah, God said it, and even Yeshua said it, don't make vows. So why? I guess it was a habit people had of doing. I really don't understand it. Haven't really had a great desire to find out. To me, it just seems illogical. And until we get to the point where we actually have a temple standing or a tabernacle standing, where people could take it to the priest and have their gift evaluated, it's kind of a moot point, anyways. So. I do want to look at verse 22, though. If anyone dedicates to the Lord a field they have bought. Okay. Well, here the specific case is not part of their family land, but this comes up in the Brita Chadashah, where Yeshua takes after the Pharisees, saying, that they have an activity called korban. Korban is that root word here being used, and it actually means destined to destruction. And sometimes you see that in a translation, that it's doomed or to be destroyed or something like that, or to be sacrificed. And that word and the word korban shows up in the Brita Chadashah untranslated. Okay. Well, at the time of Yeshua, you already had some very, very heavily established rules and practices about korban, and among them, one of the things that Yeshua was complaining about is he said you have a commandment to care for your father and your mother, especially in their old age, and yet if you were to make the statement that the money I would have earned out of this particular field I would have spent on caring for my mother and father, but I have declared that field to be korban. Then I can't use that money. Therefore, I am free of my obligation to care for my parents. And this is what Yeshua was complaining about: is they were severely misusing korban for financial gain, rather than it being a gift to God, which is what it should have been. And so parents can be expensive to care for when they're older. They're sick more often. They might need a couple people to help them through the day, and that may be an expense you don't want to cover. So anyways, that becomes part of the problem. Okay. You can't dedicate a firstborn because it's already dedicated. Excuse me. Okay. Verse 29, no person devoted to destruction may be ransomed. They are to be put to death. Okay, this is somebody who is on a death penalty, and that's somebody who's committed murder, someone who has blasphemed the name of the Lord. There's no way of redeeming them. They're gone. Okay. Okay, verse 30, the tithe of the land goes to the Levite. Okay. Now notice, and again, this is where you get some of the terminology. When we're talking about tithing, notice it's everything from the land. Okay, what's grown out of the land, whether it's fruits, vegetables, or animals that are born. Oops. Okay, that's our Torah portion. That's oh, there we are. Okay. Any questions, comments? Shalom, Yonatan. Okay, why is this not wanting to pop up? No, I'll find it. Okay, Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah 16:19. 16. Oops. No, it's not what I wanted. 16:19. Okay. So, we'll ask this question every time we read from the prophets. Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu. When was he a prophet, and to whom was he a prophet? Okay. Okay. He was a prophet during the exile, the Babylonian exile. Okay. I'm sorry, no. He was a prophet at the end of the last of the kings. I had Ezekiel in my mind, but actually it was Jeremiah. He was prophesying during the time of the last kings, and the timing of this prophecy, assuming everything is in date order, chronological, this would still the Babylonians would be either surrounding Jerusalem or in the process of taking the land around Jerusalem when he was prophesying. So he was prophesying to Israel, and very, very much to the kings who were not good kings at this time, who were not walking in the Lord's ways, but were rather chasing after other things as if they were God. So there's lots of strong warnings here. Starting off at verse 19, Lord, my strength and my fortress, my refuge in time of distress. To you the nations will come. Oops, wrong. I'm in the wrong spot, aren't I? No, that's right. Okay. Nations will come from the ends of the earth and say, our ancestors possessed nothing but false gods, worthless idols that did them no good. Okay. So, right in the middle of all the paganism that Israel was doing and being surrounded by or being attacked by Babylon at this time with all their gods, okay, this is a psalm, a prayer. Lord, my strength and my fortress, my refuge in time of distress. To you the nations will come from the ends of the earth and say, our ancestors have possessed nothing but false gods, worthless idols that did no good. Okay, so at the time the leaders were chasing after false gods, at the time that Israel was just about to be conquered by people who worship false gods, here is this promise, this reminder, that God will be shown to be true and all the other things false, and the nations of the world will come to worship the one true God. Okay? And this is for everybody, especially those of us who are Gentiles. We come to this realization. Our ancestors possessed nothing but false gods, worthless idols that did them no good. Okay? And then, the rhetorical question, do people make their own gods? Yes, but they are not gods. Okay? So the nation's coming, and this is a promise. Israel at this point is being very unfaithful, but the promise here is that nations of the world will come and say, what we learned before was nothing. Nothing. Worthless idols that could do nothing for nothing at all. Okay? And then you have what's the value of making our own gods? You calling them gods when they're not. Okay? And so this is a promise to the Gentiles. Therefore I will teach them, this time I will teach them my power and might. Then they will know that my name is the Lord. So this is God's promise to the Gentile. So if you're not Jewish, cool. This is a promise for you. Okay. So you'll be taught by God, and you will know His power and His might. So this is a cool thing. Okay. And then Jeremiah goes back. God takes Jeremiah back to Judah. Now, why are we specifying Judah here? It's because at this time, the northern kingdom had already been conquered by Assyria. And the way the Assyrians did things is they would take a conquered people, split them up, and salt them amongst the entire kingdom of Assyria in order to cause them to disaffiliate from where they were and become basically global citizens, I guess you can call it, without a people of your own, completely intermixed. Okay, so the northern kingdom is gone. The northern 10 tribes are gone. The only thing left now is Judah, which represents both Judah and Benjamin in the southern kingdom, and those people of Levi, the Levites and the priests, who were down in Jerusalem. Okay, so those were the only tribes that were left. Okay, those are the only people left at this point. So the prophecy is specifically to the southern kingdom, what's left of it. Rapidly losing territory to the Babylonians, and if not even under siege at this point. Okay. Judah's sin is engraved with an iron tool, inscribed with a. Now this translation is flint point. Others say diamond point. Both would be functional. Flint would be more usable, considering the usage. I don't know if anybody would use something as valuable as a diamond as a writing implement. Anyways, the point is, it's strongly imprinted and cut with something very sharp. Okay, so it's very, very, very clearly pointed, very clearly stated. Okay, so what God is saying through Yirmiyahu is that Judah's sin is extremely obvious, and you can't miss seeing it. So even the children of the leaders, the children, are actively involved in their religion. The altars and Asherot of the pagans, and the way that they did. Interesting thing is, God says, you trust in your possessions and your wealth. Other people are going to get those, and you'll be taken away as plunder. Because of the sin that's going now throughout. Remember, and this is, if I may wax political slightly, for whom you vote makes a big difference, because you're putting them in control of our society and control of our country. And so do you want somebody who's going to take you away from God's commandments and prevent you from walking in God's ways? Or do you want somebody in command of the country who will help you and aid you in walking with God and keeping His commandments? Okay? Because otherwise, verse 4 counts for us. Through your own fault, you will lose the inheritance I gave you. I will enslave you to your enemies in a land you do not know, for you have kindled my anger, and it will burn forever. Okay? And you think about it, who is trying to take our nation away from us? Who's trying to help us to walk closer to God? Who's trying to tear us away from God? we need to look very carefully about whom we vote, for whom we vote. And again, this strikes me as, in modern terms, kind of political. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. Okay. Yeah, we have people running the country, but what's the spiritual condition of the people running the country? Is the Bible their guideline? If it isn't, we need to be cautious with those people. We need to we should not allow people who don't honor God's word to be in control over us, because otherwise we end up with all kinds of unrighteous things. Where our society is getting back to normal and meeting once again together, yet there are some governors that saying definitely not congregations, houses of worship. They're singling us out for exclusion from returning to full participation in society. Okay. Okay. Shalom Joff, by the way. I'm trying to read the text going by in very fine print, and because I had my eyes worked on yesterday, very tiny fuzzy print. But so if I miss something or take a long time trying to read something, don't take it personal. It's my eyes. Okay. So, but verse 7, blessed the one who trusts in the Lord, and like a tree planted by the water, we're not going to see the troubles and the sorrows. We may go through hard times, but we have that living water in us, kind of using the parable of the tree somewhat, that we are going to get through this, and we're actually going to prosper. Even if it's hard financially, even if bad things happen financially, we will end up prospering. Okay. Verse 11, interesting parable. Like a partridge that hatches eggs it did not lay, are those who gain riches by unjust means. Okay. What does this mean? Okay. The partridge is a bird that is willing to put in the extra effort to incubate eggs it didn't lay. Now, we don't know for sure if the partridge really understands what's going on and they choose to do so, or if it's just one of those things, that's the way they're programmed, that's the way they're designed. They see an egg, they take care of it. Not all birds do that. Some if you put a strange egg in some bird's nest, the parent birds will push that egg out. But apparently partridges don't. Okay, but so this is, those who gain riches by unjust means are the same. So what's the picture here? Okay, what does the partridge do by accepting the task of raising the young of others? It takes on a lot of extra work it didn't have to do. Okay, and not just incubating the eggs, but also feeding the chicks once they're hatched. Okay. So those who want to gain riches by unjust means is a similar idea of you have to put in a lot of extra work just to get that unjust means of gaining wealth. Okay? And what value is it? Money has no loyalty. Once you spend it, it doesn't come back. It doesn't come back to you. Once you spend it, it's gone. Okay, money has no loyalty, and so the other half of this doublet, saying the same things twice, when their lives are half gone, their riches will desert them. In other words, when they are no longer able to cheat and lie and steal, their livelihood, the volume of their livelihood disappears, and in the end, they will prove to be fools. Okay, because they will be a proverb, a byword of someone who is evil. And they won't have the reputation that they thought they deserved. Okay, glorious throne, exalted from the beginning, place of our sanctuary. Okay. The Lord is the hope of Israel, and all who forsake you will be put to shame. Those who turn away from you will be written in the dust. This is a juxtaposition. Those who cling to God and follow his ways will be blessed. Those who turn away will be written in the dust. The American equivalent for that would be kind of like writing your name in the sand at the beach. Okay, what happens? Well, in short order, the tide comes in and wipes out your name, and there's absolutely no recognition or remembrance of that name being written in that piece of sand when it's over. Okay, so, and those who forsake God will be forgotten people. Okay, let's move over to okay. Then last is Matityahu 22, 1-14. So give me a moment to get that up. How did we end up with this? Okay, give me a second. Complete Jewish Bible. There we go. That's better. Okay. Yeshua again used parables in speaking to them. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding. Oops, let me get the text up just in case somebody has something to say. And yeah, one of the daughters with the young eyeballs. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Okay. Kingdom of Heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding feast for his son. This is a very, very popular format for parables. Parables, there's a standard format for parables. Parables are a story that has characters, it has plot, it has action, thrills, chills, and there's an odd twist in it. There's always a shock element in the parable, and then the parables usually follow with a lesson explaining what the meaning was. Not always. Sometimes Yeshua said, I'm not telling you this. You guys can figure it out yourself. Meaning basically, you guys need to grow and learn into working some of the stuff out on your own, instead of just being like little kids and always asking, "What's this mean, Daddy?" Okay. So, Kingdom of Heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding feast for his son. So the king is in parables, usually when they're talking about the king, they're talking about God. Not necessarily always, but usually. But when he sent his slaves to summon the invited guests to the wedding, they refused to come. So he sent them again to tell the guests, "Look, I prepared my banquet, slaughtered my bulls, my fattened cattle, everything's ready, come to the wedding." This is very similar to another parable he made, but not exactly the same. But they weren't interested and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, and the rest grabbed his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was furious and sent his soldiers, who killed those murderers and burned down their city. Okay, which we know happened about 70 AD. And then he said to his slaves, Well, the wedding feast is ready, but the ones who were invited didn't deserve it, which we know from the Sadducees at Yeshua's trial saying, his blood be upon us and on our children. They didn't deserve to be there. So got to the street corners and invite to the banquet as many as you can find. So they did. And the slave here, again, we talked about this earlier, it means servant. It doesn't necessarily mean undesirable property or chattel property like we talked about. Okay. 7-minute delay now. Good night. Okay, so Joss. Okay. Oh, wow. 7-minute delay on the type. Okay. Hopefully we can come limping into the end of this thing before everything breaks down. Okay. So they went and gathered all the people they can find. Interesting comment. This is partially a shock element. The bad along with the good. Now you think about that. To whom was this parable spoken against? Okay. It was against the Sadducees and Pharisees who thought themselves more righteous than everybody else. They had the system that made them more righteous, at least in their opinion. And they felt deserving to look down on other people as being, the phrase is Am Haaretz, the people of the land. We would, modern terminology would use phrases like rednecks or yokels or country bumpkins. Uninformed, dirty, unwashed people, that kind of thing. So here you have a minor shock element that the bad along with the good were brought in. Okay. Now, if you think about it in the terms of the Besorah, the good news, is it didn't matter what your past was. Okay. If you were a bad person, when you turn to the Lord, what happens with all that bad past? Okay, it's forgiven. Are there going to be some consequences maybe? Are there some bad habits you still have to work with to get over? Yeah, but the point is, that's all gone. Okay, but other people might look upon somebody who has had a bad past and think they are less worthy because of that bad past. And so there's a minor shock element here that those who, what was necessary to be in this wedding? To accept the invitation. Okay? That was the only thing necessary, to accept the invitation. Okay. So it didn't matter what you were before. Now you've invited the invitation. Okay. Yeah, it does matter. You may have something to outlive, but you know what I mean? As far as being in the kingdom, being at the feast, this wedding feast, it didn't matter at this point. Okay? So the king comes in to look around what's going on. There's a man who's not dressed for the wedding. And he starts off with, friend. You know you're in trouble when the guy starts off with that. Friend, how did you get in here without wedding clothes? And the man was speechless. Okay, let's stop there for a second. Because the shock element here, the shock element, one, there's somebody here without wedding clothes. Two, what's the punishment? Bind him hand and foot and throw him outside in the dark. In that place people will wail and grind their teeth. For many invited, but few are chosen. Okay. We need to understand a little bit of the history of what was going on in those days with weddings. Okay. When you get to the wedding, you were given special garment to wear. Okay. So to be an invited guest, and if you walked in the front door, you were an invited guest, you would have been given a garment to wear. It's kind of like, how in modern weddings you have the whole wedding party kind of wearing coordinated clothes. This would be the entire gathering with special coordinated clothes. Okay. So the question is then, how did you get in here without wedding clothes? And there's two possible explanations. One is the guy broke in, snuck in, and basically snuck in and was there without the invitation. Although given the circumstances that just anybody who shows up gets the wedding clothes, that's an idea, but it may not be the best answer. Or he chose to not wear the wedding clothes. And in doing that, he would have insulted the king, because it was provided by the king out of his joy and his kindness that everybody would participate in the joy of the wedding. Okay. Now, what it says about what did the guy say? He was speechless. He couldn't answer that. Why? Because there's nothing you can say when you're guilty. So even though this doesn't say it very plainly, the guy, by his lack of an answer, shows that he knew he was in the wrong. And apparently up until this moment, he didn't care that he was in the wrong. Okay, and here he is in the middle of the wedding. Okay, you could speculate the wedding is kind of like, it was for a son, so it could be something like the wedding feast of the Lamb. Okay, is it possible there's going to be somebody there that's not in their wedding clothes, and they're there unrighteously? I don't know. It may not connect at all in that sense, but the parable is kind of a standalone story. It's not really designed to be closely interrelated with other things that are said. It's a standalone story with a particular punchline, a particular lesson, and parables. Usually, that's about as long as it goes. It doesn't go beyond the exact lesson that's pronounced here, but nonetheless, you can speculate. Okay. So the king said to the servants, "Bind him hand and foot, throw him outside." People in that place, people will wail and grind their teeth. Now they're on the outside. Now, some people argue back and forth, and again, when it comes to parables, you have to be careful that you don't investigate these things, too closely scrutinize every little detail. They're really not designed for that. They're designed to teach a lesson, and here the lesson is, okay, what is the lesson? Okay, for many are invited, but few are chosen. Okay, so what does this mean? Many are invited, but few are chosen. Okay, the way we read in English, it's a little bit difficult because it gives rise to the potential thought that maybe everything's predestined and you have no choice, because the invitation was for everybody, but only the chosen are the ones that are in, meaning, God chose. I'd like to condition this by suggesting a slightly different understanding, that the chosen are the ones that choose to accept the invitation. Okay, not that we have no choice, but rather that God knows our choices ahead of time and prepares for us accordingly. Okay, so we are the chosen, not in the sense that God picked us out of the rest of the world without our say-so, but we are the chosen in that we have chosen to react to God's invitation and to choose positively to react to God's. And that's my 2 cents on that, because it doesn't seem to make sense to reduce us to automatons that have no choice in anything, especially since we're taught frequently in other places that it is our choice to receive the gift that God has given us in Messiah. Okay. That's basically it. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? Okay. Good. The positional standing of justification of God by faith in Yeshua. Yeah, it is. It's given to us. Yeah, you're right. It's good. I usually have an argument in the middle of this. That's why I'm stopping and thinking about it. Yeah, we have the position of standing. We are justified by God in because of our trusting what Yeshua did for us counts for us. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The difficulty I have is a lot of people make the argument that's all we need to do. All we do is so there's no relationship with God, just a positional standing. You follow me on that? So I'm not disagreeing with him. It's just that I'm used to the other half of the argument coming up. That being in a position of standing with God, there's nothing else that we can ever do. Period. That's it. And the idea that we have the end result is that we negate for ourselves any responsibility to live a holy life because we have that position. Doesn't matter what we do, what we don't do, we have that position, and that's not a good position to stand on. But yeah, what you've mentioned is right on good. Okay, so that's why I was fumbling a little bit. Okay, any other questions, comments, rebukes? I think earlier I said we were about a minute behind. Gail had mentioned that we were maybe 7 minutes behind, so I don't know how long I want to leave this open for everything to finish off. Okay. Predestined plan that those who come will come through Yeshua and be conformed to his image. Yeah.
It's not 7 minutes. It's like 2 minutes.
About 2 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I agree with you, Jonathan, but the problem is it's not the complete story. The complete story is we have a relationship with God that induces us to do, to live, to follow, to obey. And that part's missing in the typical predestination argument. And the Bible actually pretty much says it. If you're not obeying, do you really have faith in that positional standing? And so, tis what tis. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? Okay. If something else comes in on the typing, we'll deal with it. Otherwise, I'm going to hang out here a couple minutes silent just because Gail was complaining. She got cut off early last time. I shut it off early. So I'll just leave it run, and we'll go for a couple minutes, and then we'll shut off the meeting. Thank you very much for coming, guys. God bless you. Don't forget Wednesday. We're going to, God willing, we'll finish off Galatians chapter 1. Now that we have this thing working, I'm not going to monkey with this. We're just going to keep the settings the way they are. And then, so we'll be on Wednesday, and then that'll be good. Okay. All right, shalom, kids. God bless you. Oh, don't forget, this is YouTube. If you're not, subscribe, like, hit the notification button. And so try to stay in touch. Hopefully, when we go live, you do get a notification. I'm not sure if you do or don't. But we're good. Thank you very much. Shalom, kids. God bless you. And we'll see you Wednesday, God willing. Okay. L'chaim. Last time Gail was complaining that it got cut off early. So I'm going to let it roll for 2 minutes, and if it's just us yakking for the last 2 minutes and that gets cut off, it's no big deal. Oh. It's not as sore.
Yeah. eyeballs?
Yeah. This one's a little bit sore still.
Is it because it's looking at Abby?
I think he's staring right at the problem.
No, what happened was this one, he used a different medication on my right eye than on my left eye.
Oh.
And I don't know if it's because the medication is stronger, that it, it's affected me more. It's also in part, I think he was not as smooth with my right eye as he was in my left eye.
Ew.
So he did a little banging around.
Yeah, that did do it.
All right,
Shalom, Joff. You probably won't hear this response.
Daddy.
Yeah. Here.
They just got to the part where you said if it gets cut off, no big deal.
You can.
So you can end it now.
Okay. Wait a second. Ah.
Daddy,